Hi guys, welcome back to another week of the Not So Black and White podcast. This is episode 4. I am one of the co-hosts, Tammy, and with me I have my lovely soul sister and very spiritual godmother, Deanna, who is going to bring us into this morning's talk. And yeah, let's go. Deanna, welcome.
Thank you and good morning. Well, let's start as we always do with a quiet, mindful minute or moment as we start our podcast. Our intention with the mindful moment is just to bring us to this present moment. Even if you are cleaning your house right now, you are driving in your car, you are working in your garden and listening, if it's possible to take a moment of quiet, please join us. So I'm going to ring my meditation bowl here. Just go ahead, and if it's safe for you in this moment, to close your eyes. And just taking this moment to tune in to your body and noticing where your body is in this moment. If you're sitting, just noticing where the body is touching your chair, your bed, wherever the body is resting in this moment. And bringing our awareness to our breath. No need to change the breath, just noticing the breath moving in and out. When we take a moment to just be still and connect in the body, it helps us to drop out of the mind space and to really settle in to this moment. Before we close our mindful moment, just take a nice deep breath, inhaling through your nose, and a nice deep exhale out of the mouth. Just giving yourself a little gift of a quiet moment. And just ever so gently, if you were able to close your eyes, you can come back and join us as we prepare for a fun talk today on the Not So Black and White podcast. We are going to chat about, how should I say, our moon cycle, our period, our menstruation, all different words for this real blessing of a phenomenon that I personally did not always view as a fun time in my life. And Tammy and I were speaking about this quite some time ago. And before we really dive into the conversation, I just wanted to give a shout out to any of the men that are listening to us today. Do not turn us off just because you're like, oh God, no, we don't want to talk about it. Yeah, this really can be helpful for men too, to just have more of an understanding of the reality of this for us ladies and how maybe you can be supportive during the times in our cycles as we are shifting, our energy is shifting, our hormones are shifting, moods can shift, all of these things. And so again, if you are a man and you are listening to us, we and hear our conversation today and see how this can resonate for the ladies that you have in your life, whether they are wives, mothers, daughters, sisters, cousins, friends. So Right. So that is our disclaimer as we start for the men. Do not run away frightened about our conversation. Please and thanks. So do you want to help us get started, Tammy? Like just talk to us a little bit about why this is an important topic for us to even speak about.
Mm, definitely. I mean, history has shown us, even current times, we were taught to, as women, feel like we need to isolate ourselves when we're on our periods. Men were taught that, we should be left alone, or that we're just miserable or moody. A lot of times, we find that even as women, we are ashamed of our periods. We have been taught and trained to be fearful and shameful of our cycles. Men are even disgusted by the thought of our cycles.
Right.
And I mean, this episode is so important because we're trying to spread awareness, help people to understand, and just see the truth behind the basic fact that if it were not for our periods, if we didn't have periods, we could not create. If your mother didn't have a period, it doesn't matter like what happened in her life. If she didn't have a period, she couldn't have you. And
Right.
because of that, we need to understand what it is. And I think like human nature, if it is that we don't understand something, we tend to fear it. We tend to want to shed a bad light on it if we don't really understand it. So being able to spread awareness on that and help people to understand more, and even us first to understand things more about ourselves, I think it's really a great thing. Um, I was listening to a podcast this morning, and I I mean, I started my period pretty early when I was 10. I thought that was normal, but apparently, people start at later times than that. But it's been a mostly a hate relationship for me. It's just been over the last 2 years, I guess, year and a half, that I've started to become a bit more comfortable with my period. And even saying the word period sometimes still feels like I'm saying a dirty word. I'm so sorry, guys. I'm not sure.
Well,
I have no idea what's going on with my throat.
your throat chakra has something in there. I don't know.
It definitely does. And I was thinking about that too, and I feel like I know what it is. So I can definitely see the correlation taking place. Universe is saying, Tamika can deal with that. But so I'm saying basically we fear our periods. We put pretty names on it a lot to just disguise what we're talking about because we were taught that, and it wasn't even like a direct form of teaching where people say, oh, your period is bad, your cycle is bad. It's
Right.
just, it was so taboo. It was something so, and I know like you can provide even more insight on a lot of things being like from different generations, but I find it so strange that in 2024, people still feel uncomfortable going to the supermarket and buying a pad.
Right.
I remember when I was in high school, I was so scared to buy pads. I would just look around and then I'd pick it up and I'd get it wrapped up so far. Like I would hide it. And I've always wondered why. Like why is it such a bad thing? So I mean, there are many different resources there. Like I'm doing a blog post on this just because I'm inspired. Like being on my cycle right now, even that word, we use the word cycle a lot. And
Right.
I'm learning this morning. And I know even saying this out loud, some people are going to be listening and saying, why do you just know this? But learning this morning, like your cycle isn't just the days that you're bleeding. It's like your cycle starts from day one, yes, but it goes up 28 days, 32 days.
Right.
And I'm learning that, for the different hormones that our bodies release in different times on our cycle, we react differently, or emotions are different, or energies are different,
Right.
even on a spiritual level. Like the moon has its cycles. It's our moon cycle. Like we have phases and stages, and it's a dynamic thing. So the importance of learning your cycle, understanding where you are in your cycle, will help your partner. If you're a male listening, it will help you to understand your woman better, because then you will know what she needs, or have a better idea of what she needs when. For example, like something cool that for me it's cool. I always have a sweet tooth like a
Mm.
week before my period starts,
Have
and
one all the
I
time.
try.
It's really strong by the period time.
Yeah, so I'm always like it's common knowledge that most women like sweet stuff and chocolate like before their period or in the early stages, but I've never really given much thought as to why. So this morning I was listening and I'm learning that the week before your cycle actually starts, your body starts creating progesterone. And progesterone is the hormone that helps to build the lining of the uterus. It's what, if there's going to be a baby there, it's cushioning that baby. It's the home for the baby. If there's no baby there, then it's going to shed, and that's going to be the period. That hormone that creates that safe space, that creates that life space, it requires sugar, it
Mm.
requires sweetness. And that's why a week before your period, or a week before your girlfriend's period, she just wants to lay down and eat some chocolate. Things are a little slower for her. She just wants to chill because our bodies are working, it's building, it's creating.
Right.
And it's just basically, once you get to understand more about what you need in that time, what your partner need in that time, even like on a professional level, you're working closely with a female, understanding, and that's another thing, like getting that stigma out, getting that taboo out to say that the period is bad. Imagine if a male and female are working together. A lot of times we find that there are a little bit of bad vibes, because sometimes the men will think the female is too emotional, or they're
Right.
too moody for their job, stuff like that. And it leads to a lot of other political stuff that comes after. But I think a helpful thing would be, in a world where it's not so taboo to understand a woman's cycle, if that male partner understood where in her cycle she was, where in that 28-day cycle, whether it's a time where she's using more testosterone, so she's going to be more aggressive during this period. She is having more estrogen in this like phase of her cycle, so she's going to be softer. She's going to be more, she's probably gonna cry if somebody accidentally, throws a ball and it hits a puppy or something.
Right.
Different things are going to happen. So you will see a different version of this partner. So it's not even just for like relationships. It's just on a whole for our males and our females, or masculine and feminine dynamic in whatever stage that is, in whatever place that is, for us to be able to understand each other better, because we are not just a female version of a man. Like you can't use a one size fits all type of thing. You can't just use a band-aid and say, "Oh, I don't get women," and then we have this.
Right.
Like it doesn't need to be that way. If you realize that there's something to understand, because to be real, a lot of persons don't realize that it gets deeper. But if you realize that it does go deeper, and you get to start asking questions, or maybe just understanding more, then I think we will have more unity.
Right.
And that will definitely help us. Yeah. So
Yeah,
that's
no,
my on it.
yeah, no, and I love that. It's about building understanding and thus ultimately compassion, for each other, and recognizing that it is a natural cycle. And like you said, Tammy, I mean, without it, we wouldn't even be here. None of us
Yeah.
would. So really, and it might take some time to dig deep, past all of that programming and things that we have believed around, the embarrassment or the shame of that, to really switching that to it's actually really sacred, that we go through this, each month. Like, what an amazing honor and blessing it is, even though I know it doesn't always feel like that. I know for me, I was always, maybe not directly, but inadvertently taught that periods meant pain. Like, it meant you're going to feel uncomfortable, you're going to feel, but it doesn't always have to be like that. I mean, it really doesn't have to create so much pain. Now, of course, I'm not talking about, people who have endometriosis, other issues that are happening. I am not negating that periods can be painful for people. Absolutely. But in recent years, for me, as I've tuned in more deeply, I have felt less pain from my period when I'm more in tune with what do I really need right now? Like, do I need to just lay down? Like, if that's what I need, then how do I create the space to be able to do that? I feel for me, in my experience, a lot of the pain was really coming from my resistance to it. I don't want this, in my mind. Oh, it's that time of the month again. Oh my God, here we go. Oh, now I'm going to feel cranky because I have PMS. So much of that was happening in my mind. And I really believe, our minds are really powerful. So the story that we're telling ourselves becomes that reality. And if we are dreading this experience, or we're expecting it to be painful and uncomfortable, then it will be. Again, not negating physical issues that cause incredible pain. I'm not negating, not negating that at all. But, I have switched my story in recent years to, I actually look forward to that time, because you know what? I'm all, ooh, that's my second. I'm going to have less appointments on my calendar. Like, I am going to intentionally, ahead of time, create space for myself, because I know during that time that I am going to want more rest. Also, like Tammy was saying, it's so critical, like, to get in tune with your unique cycle, because everybody's is different. Yes, there is the traditional 28 days. Not everybody falls into that, so.
And it's
Right. And it does change. And, like, I know for me, right after I ovulate, so about 2 weeks after my period, finishes, oh, I call that, I'm like, oh, that is my superwoman week. Like, I am so, like, ready. I am full of energy, full of vibe. And so I'm really trying to play around with, how can I shift my schedule around kind of these times in my cycle where I know, like, oh, I'm going to have a lot of energy. Maybe this is a good week to film some extra podcast episodes, whatever, like, because I know I'll have the energy. And then when my cycle comes, I know it's, just a different energy at that time. And so creating, that space. And I realize not everybody, can control your schedule in that way. Like, you've got kids that you have to take to school, and this needs to happen and that needs to happen. But you can still shine the light of mindfulness on, are there ways that I can shift certain things at certain times of the month to honor what I might be feeling at that time.
And even how to, like, include other things if you can't necessarily, like, shift or switch up your routine in a way that it's feeling impactful to you. Also, keep in mind how your cycle is affecting you. Like, for example, I used to fight the urge for, like, a sweet tooth before my period, especially, like, if I'm having challenges with my weight at any particular time. I would feel guilty about having something sweet. I would refuse it, like, I'm not gonna have it, and I'd have that urge, and I'd still not give into it because I felt like it was such a bad thing. When if I had known that time that I'm actually helping my body and maybe not have like a chocolate cookie if that's like I'm feeling conscious about something else, but maybe have like a fruit salad or something with some honey and it's something like that is still sweet. I'm still feeding myself what it needs, back to our episode of mindful consumption. I'm
Right.
I'm mindfully giving myself what it needs because I'm understanding my cycle. So I totally agree with that. You'll know what your body needs and even what your spirit needs if you need to rest more or maybe instead of scrolling on social media for 15 minutes, get one of your like books that you like or go find one online and maybe just read something if you feel like it's that time where you just need to lie down and you don't want to have any sound coming in. Yeah. I like that.
And there's nothing wrong with, some good old Netflix binging at some point as well.
Yeah.
It's like if
And I
that
even
is something, that you
that's
need, like I give myself that space when I know it's close to my cycle time and I feel kind of tired. I go, oh, and then I make it like this special thing where I'm, oh boy, you know what?
I'm
I am gonna take today, watch some shows, like you said, read a book, just whatever.
because they hey, like yeah, for me for Netflix, I will watch maybe an episode or two in the week, and I find that sometimes I'll feel a little guilty if I'm watching more, and I don't even know why am I feeling guilty. No one is telling me not to watch Netflix, but I'm happy you just brought that up because last week I was even saying to my partner, I don't know what's going on. I binge watched two series last week. Two, they're mini series, so they're like just one season.
Right.
But I just watched and watched and watched, and I had two chocolate, like tiny brownies. And
Right.
I didn't realize before like doing my reading for this episode, I didn't realize that my body was actually doing something with the sugar and with the me feeling the need or the urge to binge something. Because if I had known, I probably wouldn't be questioning like what is happening here. But it was so pronounced in my subconscious, like what's going on? You're watching. This is something that I normally do, and I guess it makes sense because, and maybe Diana, you can explain a little more on this because my earphone fell out. So I'm thinking, I don't know, maybe you can provide more insight on this, but I've been realizing that the intensity of my periods are connected with what is happening before, I guess. So typical example like this. I had like a stronger urge for chocolate the week before and like the days leading up to I had a stronger urge to binge. So instead of maybe watching like a 4 episode of something, I watched like 20 something episodes, like two separate whole shows and finished it. But then on my period now, the pain is more intense. Like I'm having a more challenging period this month. And I realized that last month too, because I've been, paying attention to my cycles. Last month, when I had a really stressful period before, like a stressful situation going on, my period actually came like with more force. Like it
Mm,
hurt more. And I use a lot of plant medicine for my period pains. They're usually pretty bad. Um, and don't get me wrong, like if it's severe, like where I can't, I will take a pill. I'm not there yet where I'm completely, like, but I do wait it out. And I've been noticing that when other things feel out of place in my body, when I feel dysregulated, I'm feeling it more there. The cramps are heavier, the flow is
mm.
heavier. And I don't know if that's a thing. So I don't know if you know anything about that, but it's something new that I've been noticing.
I mean, I can't speak to the science piece of that necessarily, but, just like you said, it's being aware for your unique body and your unique cycle of going, okay, so if you're noticing this month, like I've had a stressful time and my period is more difficult, pay attention and see if that happens next month, and then go, okay, so then what can you do to help reduce that stress to then see, does that impact, your cycle? And of course, I'm not a nutritionist, so it's not my area of expertise, but I know that there's literature and work out there around what we're putting in our bodies, right? And how that affects us. And I wonder with the chocolate piece, like I mentioned, I have a sweet tooth all the time, but it definitely comes up. I also wonder when our progesterone comes up higher than estrogen, like you said, that's kind of that comfy, cozy, it's making it, but it's also, for me, that's a lower part of my period, or right before I'm going to start, where then I feel like not depressed, but just lower, like hormone wise. So I've always wondered, and I've never looked this up, so I don't know, maybe I should, if part of the wanting the sweet thing is also, that's a dopamine release. When you eat that sugar, it's going to fire up some dopamine.
That makes sense.
And so I'm just wondering if that is part of that, of, okay, maybe our hormone levels, because they're fluctuating, we're looking for something that feels good. And when you eat a piece of chocolate, that just naturally feels good for a minute, and for me, it's always about, trying the best to be moderate about it. Now, there are times, like I have sat there and I will eat, 45 cookies, and I'm like, all right, this is what I'm doing right now. So, that happens, it certainly does. We're all human, and, it does happen. But again, just trying to be mindful. So like yesterday for me, for example, my cycle's coming anytime. And it's fun for me because I'm nearing the time where it's going to start stopping, right? Like, I don't even know, like that has not happened. I'll be 49 this year. So I don't know. I think my mother stopped around 51 or something. So I'm like, oh, that's only a couple of years. So I'm always kind of paying attention, like, has something changed? What is happening here? So one thing I have found helpful is I just, on my notes app in my phone, now I know there's period tracker apps, there's all kinds of things. Mindful consumption for me is I do not have 1,000 million apps. I cannot manage that. But just in my notes, I have a little folder, periods 2024, and I put a little red heart. And then I can go back because I've got it for years in my phone. And I just put the day that I start, just the date, so that I know. And then I started last year, and it's kind of fun. I put a little note, where is the moon cycle at? Like, is it a full moon? Is it a new moon? For me, I'm just looking at the full and the new moon, and I'll make a note like 3 days before full moon, 4 days after. So it's just interesting because then I can go back and kind of look to see, for me, I'm looking at it through the lens of, is perimenopause coming? Like, what's happening, And so my cycles are still very, very regular. So I'm like, okay, like that's a signal that maybe we're not quite there yet with that piece. But it is interesting as I've kept track. Like I said, I'm about to start anytime, and we just had a full moon yesterday. But then I've had many cycles where I start at the new moon and then it switches. So I can watch through the year. And I'm like, it's so fascinating. Like, why does that happen? I don't know. I'm not sure.
I have, and this is something I read last year, and I had to find the article again to give my friend this year. I read something about the cycle of the moon on which, like, you actually start your cycle. So I'm gonna have to do some more like refreshing. I'm gonna put it in this nice blog that I'm writing. But it basically is saying with one, like full moon or new moon, with one, you're in a more teacher phase. So you're in that phase where you're giving energy, you're feeding into the collective. And then the other phase is when you're more of a healer. So like you're healing, you're helping. So it definitely, the way you do it, I think that would be such a cool like period journal for people to have. So you can actually maybe see on which cycle you are this month, and then have like a little area that you write to say how you're feeling. Like, are you in a teacher mode? Are you in healer mode? Something like that. Because then I can see how that would help to have you understand you more. A lot of people struggle with knowing what their purpose is. Sometimes not like on a whole their purpose on life, but their purpose in that moment, their purpose in that phase of their life or that place in their life. I think that would be cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I think what you're getting at here too is it's a great tool for just further self inquiry, right? Getting to know yourself on that physical level as it relates to the cycle, but then on
Right.
that energetic level as well. And really just, the more that I really believe, the more that we can get to know ourselves and we turn our focus to learning this instead of trying to figure out everyone else. Like, don't try to figure out everybody else. Try to figure
It's
out you,
so
because as we do that inner work, I know from my experience, it makes me a better human because I'm more able to develop and cultivate compassion for other people because I realize as I work on this, it's not just me. It cannot be just me. I am not the only woman on my period. It's not the case. And for me, I find some comfort in that of knowing that this is something that everybody's going through, and people have been going through that for a long time. And, like you were saying, I think there's, definitely ancient wisdom that I am not in this moment aware of to be learned and gleaned from
mhm,
how other cultures, how do other women, honor this
right.
time or experience this time. And,
And how we
again,
can
say again.
and how we can pass that on, like us
Right.
learning and sharing, it helps to show us how we can pass it on. Because for even for me, having a daughter, for you being in the position of like you're like a beacon for younger women.
Mm,
You and I are both in different but similar positions to share the information that we're learning about our periods. Whoever is watching or listening has that opportunity to share with people that they know, that persons who will need to know. Because if we had known some of these things when we were younger, then we would have been a little more equipped. And if we look at that on a wider range, we would have less people being afraid of their periods, less people being afraid to talk about it, um, less girls being afraid when they need a pad or a sanitary napkin to just
right.
go and ask for one. It's something. So I remember even for myself in school, asking for a pad. Even sometimes as an adult, when I see people trying to ask you if you have an extra pad or so, it's kind of hush hush. They kind of
Right.
get a bit nervous, like pad,
Right.
and it's something that we still, even though there's more awareness on it now. We talk more about it. We're still on a whole pretty much afraid of our peers, I would say, and it is like necessary to help for the other generation coming to be less afraid and more open to understanding and even come prepared as like a young woman knowing what to come into, because as you said, like you associated your period with pain before even feeling the pain. You're
Right.
saying like you're prepping your mind it's gonna be
Right.
a painful time. And it's a similar thing for me too. Like even learning it in school, we the first thing we hear, it hurts.
Right.
That's
Right.
one of the first things. And it's 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 just wild thinking about it from like an objective point of view, saying we're women. We go through this thing for so many years out of our lives. And yet, even as adults, we are afraid of it.
Right.
We even are afraid to talk to our partners or husbands about it. And it's it's very interesting to see how our minds can be programmed. How if we don't be mindful about what we're consuming, how we don't if we don't be mindful of how we steer our ship, as in our attention or mind, we can be led down paths that are filled with fear,
Right.
are filled with a lot of just vibes that we don't need, man.
Right. Yeah, man.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
I
and
just
that
like,
I'll bring up something that's probably super taboo since we're talking about it anyway. What about having sex on your period? Now, that has
yeah,
been something that I know my first husband was like, that is disgusting. That is not happening. Right. And so, and because I was with him from the time I was 17 till 36, that's all I knew. I didn't know that it was even possible because it was just no, like,
yeah,
and, I have learned for myself later in life that actually that can be a really great experience during that time. It actually can feel really good. Now, men who are listening, I would love to have you weigh in the comments. Please talk to us about that. But, I think that is something that, no one ever talked to me about before.
that,
Nobody that was not a conversation. It was, like I said, I just learned from my first marriage that was never an okay thing. And then I internalized that and, just leave it to be said that in my journey after my divorce, I learned that that is not true for all men. I will just say that. Some men are completely fine. They don't care. So, what about you, Tammy? What thoughts do you have on that?
I mean, similarly in a sense, but for me, I am, I can't even tell you where it started or why, but I'm a licensed practical nurse, right? But I have such a fear, or I had such a fear towards blood, I can't even practice to the point where even my own period, I spent most of my life, I'm trying to get rid of it. One time, before I even had kids, and I have three beautiful kids, I was like, I'm gonna remove my womb. I can't do this. Like, no,
Oh,
it's horrible. Like, I would get so stressed
right,
when it came to my period. I had a crap load of pain. And putting this to say, I don't know if that's where the fear came from or the fear caused that. I don't even know what happened right there. And, as I said, I started pretty early. But for my entire adult life, I have been the one that says, like, nope,
nope, okay,
nope. The male partner would be like maybe suggesting it. I remember I had an ex a few years ago, and he said, let's try. And I'm like,
mm-mm.
no, 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 no. And he's like, it's fine. I'm okay with it. And I'm like, yeah, you are.
Right.
And he was like, but it's yours. And I'm like, yeah. And I
Yeah.
would, it was horrible. And then I tried it. He made it comfortable. He put a lot of towels and stuff, dark colors, so I wouldn't feel uncomfortable. But I enjoyed it, to be honest. Like in the moment, I enjoyed it. But when I thought of it afterwards, I still felt, it was blood, and
Right,
that was how I was being. And for years after that, I still felt that way. But now, over the last, I'd say maybe a year, I have started to get more comfortable with the idea, and now the it doesn't make me feel uncomfortable. The only thing is, I have read that it helps with the pain. If like you have an orgasm on your period, it helps with the pain. But sometimes my pain is so bad that I
right,
can't see anything there. So
right,
now it's not like a taboo thing for me in my relationship. It's safe to do. I feel safe to do that, like emotionally safe. Um, but when I do experience those pains, I cannot fathom the thought of
right.
anything at all. happening to that part. But yeah, on a whole, now, just going through that journey, now I'm okay with it. And I know it's like beneficial. I know it's even like a heightened sexual experience because you are sharing on such a deep level. Like you're sharing everything. There's a song I like. Um, I'm always singing it to my partner, like just this one line. So the line says, um, take a sip of my holiest water. You know I'm a part of your soul now.
Ah,
So right. So I'm thinking like the exchange of bodily fluids on such an intimate, deep,
right.
creative level. I think there's nothing like it. I think it's sexy. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Well, and I feel compelled to just share in this moment too. We talked about, like you mentioned a few times, being embarrassed to buy pads, when you're younger so then there's the whole piece of, if we're talking about the sex part, tampons versus pads versus there's that
Yeah.
piece of all of that too. So
And
I'll
free.
just Yeah, so I'll just share. I've used a menstrual cup for probably almost 20 years now. And
How does that work? I've heard of those. Please share.
I love them. Now, there's different kinds, and you can have them, where they're specially fitted to you. I think the Diva cup is something that is out now in like pharmacies and things in the States. I don't know about here in Jamaica. I use a brand that they're actually disposable. And I've used them for years. Now you're supposed to change it every time, like you would change a tampon. You throw the cup away, and I don't do that. And I've been doing that for years. Like I use one cup for each period. And so I'll buy a box of 14 of them. I order mine on Amazon when I'm here, because I can't get them here. And so for me, going back to our episode on mindful consumption, it's also something I think about the environmental impact, of the things that we're using for our periods, because we have no choice. We have to use something, right? And, so just thinking of that. So, but going back to the cup, it's great for sex because the one that I have, I'm not going to get it out and show because I don't have one handy. But if someone's really dying to know, you can look it up on Amazon. I think the ones I use used to be called Instead cups. So like instead of a pad, instead of a tampon, instead of a cup. I think they changed it. I feel like it's called Flex or something now, but it's a round, to me, it almost looks like a diaphragm. It's a round circle, but it's plastic that you can squeeze. And then the bottom part, it's almost like a Ziploc bag of plastic. Like, so it's flexible. Now, like the Diva cup is more, it's hard. I have felt one, I've never used one, but it's like a harder plastic. Anyway, with that Flex cup that I use, you don't even know. Like it keeps everything in place. Like I have asked partners in my journey, like, can you feel that? And some of them will be like, I felt something, but it was fine. Like it didn't bother them. I mean, similar again to a diaphragm because it goes up and cups the cervix and just collects. Now, I have also heard of, I've done it myself a few times just for funsies. I can't tell you there's some great benefit. My husband's going to murder me, I'm sure. But to take the menstrual blood from the cup and I dump it in a plant. Like
I was
water.
gonna say that I saw somebody like I follow this girl. She's a herbalist. And she does a lot of like rituals and stuff like that. And she every month she uses her menstrual blood to water her plants. And sometimes like when she's making compost, she'll put it in and she will do
Right.
a whole thing. And she has like the most amazing garden. And I'm like, I sent it to my best friend last week. I saw the video and I sent it to her and I was like, I would love to get to this level, but I don't think I'm there yet because the thought doesn't repulse me or anything. Like I think it's pretty cool. It's interesting. I would try that,
Right.
but I'm not there yet.
Right. And
I'm
that's
not even.
okay.
Yeah. I
Right.
even heard like she told me about they have like I don't even know what they're called, but they're like instead of pads, they're the underwear.
Right. I've
Um,
seen, never tried them, but
I've never
they're,
even seen it. I don't even. I'm wondering because for me, and this is something that I'm just getting over this step now to show you how far behind I still am with my period love. This is just me being real. I there was a point before where every time like I went to the bathroom, like I went to pee or so, and there's just a little blood on the pad, I'm changing it. I don't want to see it. I don't want it to touch me. And I realized over the years that that's wasteful, that's pointless, and it was unnecessary, but it was still like a fear within me.
right.
And then I worked through that. Now I can go for a sensible, amount of time until it's actually used and needs to be changed. But even so, like still feeling it, I still don't like how it feels on me. So even when you were talking about the cup, that kind of sounded appealing to me.
Right.
But when they say like the full underwear, to me, I don't think I could handle that because I'm feeling it in more places now, or I'm assuming because I don't know how it works. But the cup, so like it just holds it up there, like it keeps it.
Yep. Yeah. And so, and now my flow has changed over the years, but when my flow was like really, really heavy, I could feel it like in the cup. So in the beginning of my cycle, I'd have the cup and I'd wear a pad and I could literally feel it. I would say, oh, my cup runneth over because I could feel it.
I just thought that when you
Come on. I could feel it. And I'd be like, oh God, I have to go and like change the backup, right? So now I don't have a flow like that. So my cup doesn't run it over and it's fine. But for me, the cups have been life changing because, I can swim with them in, you can do it just keeps everything where it needs
because
to be.
even a tampon, I don't love my tampon relationship started really late. I was so afraid of tampons, and it's funny because I suggested like my sister-in-law the other day, like we wanted to go to the beach, but she was on her period, and I'm like, I have tampons, I can give you a tampon. And she was like, no, and I said, why? Your friend's like, yes, and I laughed because I used to be so scared of tampons. I thought it was painful. I read one time about the TSS, the shock, and I was like, I don't want to die.
Right.
They can kill me. And it was a whole thing. So I'm saying even now to go swimming, I still don't really like using the tampon simply because I just don't like how it feels. Like
Right. Right.
I don't like. So I'm definitely gonna look into the cup
Yeah.
and see because that's cool. And even putting it with the plant, do you find that it works for you? Like, does it fertilize it, or did you just try it?
I don't know. And I don't do it all the time. For a while, I had a plant in my bathroom. So I was like, all right, like it's right in here. I'm just going to see why I want and put some water in there and mix it. I don't know if it had any benefit or not. The plant didn't die. So yay for that.
Yeah, I was gonna get into it.
Right.
Right.
It didn't die. It didn't die. So, there is that piece. But I love the cups. Now, the funny thing is, my husband and I were stuck in Peru for 5.5 months during COVID. And who travels without your own period supplies? Apparently me. Right. So we were only supposed to be there 11 days, then go to Panama. How do I not have even one cup with me? Not even one. And here I am in a foreign country in the middle of COVID. And I'm like, I guess I'm going to become friends with tampons again. So I did not love it. I bought a few pads. So I had a recent experience of 5 months of having my cycle in Peru without my beloved cups. Now, let me tell you, I got a cup in every effing bag that I own now. Let me tell you there.
Free bleeding. Like I know people that do that, not personally, but I've seen people do that. It's interesting.
Yep.
I guess that's what I can say now for me.
I did some of that in Peru sometimes because, we're in quarantine, we're not going anywhere. And I'm with you. I don't like the feel of the tampon. Like the cup, I don't feel it, don't know it's there. But a tampon, I always know it's there. I mean, come on, I've shoved a piece of cotton up my pum pum. I know it's there. I don't like it. I don't like it. So there would be times in Peru Right. Where I would do, just going, all right, I'm just going to put on a pair of black underwear and not sit right on this couch because it's not mine and that is rude, but just allow myself to do it because I just didn't want the tampon. Like I said, now every bag I own, trust and believe I have stuck a cup somewhere just in case, because if I had had one, I would have used it for the whole 5.5 months, because I wash like I said, I rinse mine in between and normally just throw it away at the end, even though the box specifically tells you not to do that. But, I've always done my own way. And I just feel like, well, they don't want you to do that because, they're going to tell you it's unsanitary. They want you to buy more, right? So it's like, they know for Deanna, I buy one box a year. And that is it. And that gets me through my entire cycle. And it's less than $20 US, and that's all I need for the year. And again, I just, I always try to be mindful going, is there, what is my environmental impact with what I'm choosing to use? And then just the last thing that I want to mention before we close for today is, my experience a little moving to Jamaica where I don't always have running water and understanding in a whole new level and thinking about women all over this world who do not have regular running water, no access to, a cup, a pad, a tampon, none of that. And my heart goes out to them, like it just really, for me, has been an experience of deepening my compassion and understanding of how privileged many of us are, to even have the conversation of, I want to choose a tampon or a cup or a pad. For many women in this world, that is not even a thing, let alone clean water. I've had a few times living here that I have been on my cycle, the pipe water is gone, the tank is low, and you're just like, holy, like what I would not give just for one shower, dude. So any thoughts you want to share on that? Because you've been here your whole life. So
yeah. Because some places, there are some places here that seem to never have water issues, and most recently in my life, 2018, let's say 2019 to 2021, where I lived, seemingly endless supply of water. There's always water. The shower, it was always forced. There was like a 10-foot concrete tank outside. So even when the water was gone, there was still like a good supply of water to last me for a while. End of 2021, I moved to the city where ironically had water issues. I'm coming from the country and coming to the city. Only to find out the water issue. No one told me this. The water issue didn't just start. It started like 2 years ago. There was no water there, no water access. We had to truck water to get it to the tank. And, in that period, it was a very low cash period for me. There were times when I went extended period without water. There was a river down the road from me. I lived on a hill. There was a river. Yeah, and I kid you not. You guys have heard my struggle with my own cycle and my discomfort that I'm trying to evolve. I'm evolving, not trying. I'm evolving.
Right.
I learned how to bathe at the river. I learned how to carry bottles of water up the hill so that I could bathe because I couldn't. But even before then, before I realized I could just go down to the river because it's coming up a hill, so it is hard to do. Before I realized I could do that, when I had just a little tiny bit of water, it stressed it stressed me a lot. We're gonna say that, but now I moved from there, so the water situation is better. But we still have periods. We're coming out of a 2-week period now with no water. The water came this morning, and I was like,
oh, our water came on literally before I sat down. My husband's like, the water's back. I'm like, what? And I said, I want to see what's going on.
Hallelujah. Yeah. I heard the tank. I'm like, okay, thank you, God. So I am not like I don't struggle as much with it as in emotionally or mentally because I know now that hey, things happen. Things happen. Just do what you have to do. If you have one bottle of water, just take your time and do what you need to do. So I try not to stress about it. So I don't feel that like disruption in my energy anymore. But I mean, coming from Jamaica, like being born and raised here, I can tell you the strangest thing that puzzles me all the time. Jamaica is the land of wood and water.
Mm.
Yes,
Mm.
we ain't got no water.
Okay.
So I think it's funny, it's ironic, but it's Jamaica.
Oh, there was, I don't know, it was last year, the year before, maybe it's still, it just came to my awareness. People around here were hashtagging land of wood and water trucks. And I was laughing.
That makes
Right. I was
that
like, yeah, man. Like, but just bringing it back to that challenge of, when you're on your cycle. And like I said in the beginning, I know mine's coming any moment. And that's been in my mind of going, oh, please bring this water back, please. Like I have water, but of course, then this is another topic for another day. Our tank decided that we don't know why we woke up in the morning, the tank was empty. Tammy, why? Why? We don't know. 400 gallons of
wow.
water gone. But so we wake up in the morning, no piped water, tank is completely empty, and there's no water in the yard. So we're like, still a mystery.
Wow.
Where did that go? But anyway, so I just thought it was important to bring up, especially for someone like me coming from the States where, as long as you pay your bill, you're gonna have water. Even I grew up in California and we're always a drought in California. But the drought never meant no water came out of the pipe. It never meant that,
Mm.
which is fascinating,
Wow.
right? Like,
That's
I never
no, because
remember a
every time
time.
I hear about California having a drought, I just assume like when we have droughts, no one has water. We
Right,
know that no one
right.
has water here. It's not like that
No, they would, they'd encourage us to ration, like, people stop watering your lawns, that kind of,
there.
useless piece of using water. Or, like, and I'm still do this just naturally, like I don't flush every time I just pee, no, like I'm not going to waste the water for that. But then again, coming back to when you're on your cycle, like, well, that's a little different. I'm not going to have my toilet look like a murder scene. And my husband's like, like, fine. Like, you want to flush it at that point because, you're sharing space with somebody else. You might not want to. Um, but anyway, just, I thought I would bring that topic up just because, so many of us in the Western world are very spoiled and very privileged that, water is just there. And, that's so not true in so many parts of the world. And now having this new experience of being here, whew, I know that challenge in a different way when you're like, I am on my period and I have like that much water. Wow, a little stressful. So, anyway, I am so happy that my water came back on today. Sounds like you have water too. So,
Yeah, yeah.
our tank is filling right now, and yay for that. So, well, I think
Oh,
we need
and
to
maybe check
close.
for a leak in the
Oh,
house. Maybe
say
if
again.
the tank. No, I'm saying maybe check for a leak in the house. Like if the tank is going to the house. I don't know.
I don't know. Well, my husband said there's something about like a reverse valve, like that needs to be on the tank. He said it might have just gone back into the main. And I'm like,
Mm.
really? So they just took our tank of water, not literally,
Wow.
like just, and
But
then
yeah,
the water's
yeah,
still
yeah.
off same way. Like,
Oh
that's
wow.
terrible. So anyway, thankfully, we live in Portland. We've had to
Mhm.
learn. We've got 3 barrels in the backyard full of water that are covered. So we've been able to go in there, and then I keep 2 5-gallon jugs of water in my bathroom, and they do not get touched unless the piped water is gone. And so then today, with piped water coming back, we will be filling all the jugs, all the drums, ready for the next time because it will happen again, but that's all right. So, well, thank you, Tammy. That was a really fun conversation. And I just really appreciate your perspective and sharing and your vulnerability, especially when we talked about the sex part for the periods. That was fun. So we'll end on that with our mindful moment here. So if you are able to close your eyes and just join us for another mindful moment as we close episode 4 of the Not So Black and White podcast. Just taking a moment here. Let's put a hand on your heart. Just go ahead and take a nice, slow, deep breath. Just taking a moment here and allowing our conversation to just resonate throughout your being. We would love to hear from you in the comments if you have thoughts that you'd like to share, or maybe something came up today that you'd like to contemplate further. It could be a great time to write in a journal, talk with a friend, and just process what you heard today. So take a moment here to send yourself some gratitude for taking the time to be fully present for this moment. And sending that gratitude out to all of you from me and Tammy for joining us here, sharing your presence, just being part of our community. We are so grateful. So we'll close with one more nice deep breath. May you carry a vibration with you today of peace and calm, and share that vibration with those you come in contact with. And just gently opening your eyes if you were able to close them. Thank you again so much, Tammy. Thank you to all of our listeners for being here. Again, we would love to hear any feedback that you have. And we are closing episode 4 of the Not So Black and White podcast. And we will see you next time.